welcome everybody to I guess the third, fourth week of off season. I don't even remember anymore. It's Mardi Gras week. I don't even know what day of the week it is. Ash Wednesday. I do know that. But anyway, Bob, I know yesterday was just a Tuesday for you. But have you ever been to New Orleans for Mardi Gras?
1 year, yeah. My doubles partner and I, it was the '96 Super Bowl, Super Bowl 20. I think it was 29 when the Packers beat the Patriots. We had tickets to go to the Super Bowl, and me being a Bronco fan, who were the number one AFC seed, and him being a Steeler fan, he was, the Steelers were coming off. Super Bowl 31. Steelers were coming off Super Bowl 30, defending AFC champions. We figured, okay, we'd buy Super Bowl tickets, which were not as ridiculously expensive back then as they are now. Figuring that at least one of our AFC teams would be in it, right? Well, both teams got knocked out, upset in the first round. So we debated. We'd been to New Orleans before for volleyball tournaments, so we wanted to go back down. We're like, oh, we have no interest in going to the Super Bowl. So we actually sold our tickets, moved our trip, our hotel reservations, plane reservations back, and went to Mardi Gras that year. So yeah, long story short, I've been there once. I was still drinking back then, so suffice it to say, I only remember bits and pieces of it.
Well, that must have been had to have been an early Super Bowl that year. Was that the year the Packers and the Patriots went? Was that
Yeah,
31
Packers,
Super Bowl?
Patriots.
Patriots. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I still had the Times Picayune insert from that Super Bowl somewhere. As I was a Brett Favre fan. I like Brett a lot. So anything that was going on in Super Bowl 31, I think I've got a bunch of stuff from that. So that's interesting. I'd love to know how much the tickets cost back then because I told this story before. Well, do you remember how much they cost?
$1,200 a piece is what we paid. So we were up there. They weren't great seats, but they were seats.
My dad went to the first Super Bowls that were played, and all three Super Bowls were played in Tulane Stadium: Super Bowl 4, Super Bowl 6, and Super Bowl 9. And he didn't go to Super Bowl 11. 12. Cowboys Broncos because he's like they're getting too expensive. I think they were $25 or $50 or $100 or something like that. And he said, "Yeah, they're getting too expensive. I'm not going." So yeah, because if you were a season ticket holder and it was played in your home stadium, you could buy tickets ahead of time, and didn't matter who it was. And that's how he got to go because he was sitting basically in his same seats he sat in during the game, during the regular season. And that's on the old wooden bleachers. So he had that little fold out padded seat that he sat on. So yeah, it was suffice it to say, it was a totally different Super Bowl era. I got a shitload of stuff my dad had brought back too. I've got the button for Super Bowl 9 and the pendant for the Steelers and the Vikings. The funny thing about it, he invited my best friend's dad. My best friend's dad's name was Lynn. Mr. Lynn and my dad went to the game, and it was one of those days where it was kind of warmish, typical January, kind of humid, not hot, but like in the upper 60s, low 70s, but a lot of humidity. And then a Arctic front came through that night, that morning. And if you look at the NFL Films footage, you can tell because it's got that overcast sky. The night before, the day when they're out in the quarter, they show the guys all cutting up and talking. You can see that's an overcast sky and the clouds are moving pretty quickly through it. And then when they show the game the next day and the people, that wind, I said, I know exactly what it must have felt like that day. That cold, damp wind. So, yeah, that's the Super Bowls my dad went to. But I'm kind of Mardi Gras out. We went out of town for Mardi Gras. That's why we weren't on last night. I got in rather late yesterday. But I like to leave town for Mardi Gras now. I mean, I rode in the parade, Back in 2017, I rode in a crew of Toth, and it's almost like once you've ridden in a parade, you standing out there watching a parade is just not the same because you just really the experience of riding in a parade is just something, it really is. You don't. I, I don't know how to describe this. It's almost like you're a rock star, but you can't hear anything. People yelling your name, and it's just one loud sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all you can hear. So I think I threw my shoulder out too because I was throwing those Nerf footballs as far as I could, out, going way out, making the kids run, go way out around. And of course, it got low hanging trees, so you hit a branch and you look terrible, but it was fun. I had a lot of fun doing that. Jerry, I think everybody should go at least once and experience it. It's the tourists that really give you all the problems. They're the ones that can't handle their liquor. They're the ones that are taking their shirts off. They're the ones doing all the trouble. But the only thing I can say that's different from when I was a kid is not only the amount of people, but what they bring out there now. When I was a kid, you brought a ladder with a little box seat for the little kids to sit on, but everybody else just kind of stood around. Now people bring furniture out there, outdoor furniture, old sofas, all this shit, folding tables, barbecue grills. It's just, and to make the room for all that, they got people camped out. They got a camper, an RV parked on the other side of St. Charles Avenue. They've got tarps laid out with stakes in it and people sleeping out there, in tents for a spot for Bacchus or Endymion. And it's just, that's the only bad part about it. Cause it's, you can't just go walk up to a parade anymore. You've got to prepare and stay out there for the day and fight for your spot and all this other shit. That's the part I can't deal with.
That's not really what the ideal of it was. And like you said, that was never really the true experience of Mardi Gras, the true experience, at least the one I went to and the people that I talked to. You walk around, you intermingle with people, you experience different foods, different liquors, just different people, different scenery, and different aspects of different parades. But leave it to people to ruin it for people.
Yeah. Well, it's just, it's just become so much now. They had to crack down. People were bringing their own porta potties, which, if my wife, who can't go more than 20 feet without having to know where a bathroom is, that's a big deal. But they had to stop people from bringing their own porta potties and putting them out there because during the week, you can't leave that thing out there. You got to take that with you, and people don't take that with them. So, they were leaving that out in the street and on the news rounds like that. It's all in the way. So they have a lot more portable bathrooms than they ever had. It used to be all the time when I was a kid, you wanted to be by somebody who either lived or knew somebody that lived in a house on the route, and you had a place to go to the bathroom. Or you're like me and you just hold it for 12 hours because you ain't going anywhere else. Yeah, they're not allowed to throw coconuts anymore at Zulu. They have to hand them to you because I guess they got too many people whacked in the head. But yeah, the coconuts, my grandmother used to get a ton of them. Every year she would get the coconuts from Zulu. It's funny that the throws are different too because everybody wants the boas are popular. Every parade seems to have its thing. Like Muses has shoes, decorated shoes. Nick's had the purses. You've got all kinds of other, something these parades are known for. And man, when I was a kid, it was doubloons. Everybody wanted doubloons. That was how. In fact, my dad rode an Endymion for 30 years. 1 year in the 80s, to get so he could throw stuff to me, he took an entire box of doubloons and just threw them up in the air like that. And these doubloons came raining down. I can remember vividly how these doubloons all come raining down. So everybody bends down to get them off the ground. Well, now my dad can see me. I didn't bend down. Threw a whole pack of beads, and his friends started bombarding me with beads. So yeah, that was different. That was different. Okay, so Mardi Gras aside, uh, the Saints are getting ready for free agency. They have to be under the salary cap by, I think, March 14th. I think it's the official start of the new league year. They started out 74 million over the cap, and with 3 moves, they shaved a little over 30 million by restructuring Ryan Ramczyk, Andrus Peat, and Michael Thomas. So I think it was Mike Triplett. I don't remember who it is now. Let me go back and look real quick. But anyway, I think Triplett had reported that they're now down to 30 million that they just have to shave off. Let me make sure I'm right on that number. Let's see. Because the reason why I'm bringing this up is I can't find it. Okay.
By my numbers, when they first announced over the weekend that Pete, Thomas, and Ramczyk had restructured, my initial numbers had us down to about 42 million over the cap. Since then, I have heard some conflicting reports that has it even lower than that. That has it in the high 30s. So you and I are somewhere, and the number probably stands somewhere between your number and my number. But needless to say, the fact that they shaved so much off just like that, folks, I cap doomsday people. I hate to say I told you so again, but I told you so again.
Yep, absolutely. In fact, I got into a discussion. Well, first, I did find this Mike Triplett joke from Mardi Gras Day. Little known fact, Mardi Gras is actually just one day today, Fat Tuesday. But Mickey Loomis and Kyle Hartley figured out how to extend it over 4 weeks every year instead. So really? Oh, yeah. You weren't good enough. Nice. Nice. Okay. So I can't go back anymore. Oh man. All right. Yes, cabbage on the 17th, St. Patrick's Day. All right, so mega drama. My dad has an infection or something on his hand, so he can't use he's left-handed. Can't use his left hand to get my mom, because my mom has dementia, get my mom ready. So because I'm doing a show tonight, I can't go over there and do it. And his daycare or person from take care of my mom told my wife she wasn't strong enough to go ahead and help do this. So that went over like a fart in church. So
do we need to cut our show tonight? I understand. I'm sure.
No. I no thanks. No, I mean there's somebody can help out. It's just I'll deal with it later. Anyway, so the question I have for us tonight is, do the Saints doing this? And there are good reasons why they do this, but the Saints doing this, cutting, restructuring deals, extending deals, to give themselves salary cap move. Is that the best way? And I'm asking you, Bob, is this the best way to reconstitute a roster to get under the cap? Or should we do what the cap nerds say and the doomsday people say and start trading high salary players away and rebuild the roster with cheaper players? What say you on that?
Alan, I think it depends on on the situation, and you have to take it by a case basis. This Mickey Loomis and Kai Hartley's blueprint is not, in my opinion, an ironclad blueprint for every single team to follow. If you believe that you are a championship caliber roster, and you have identified your core that you believe is going to take you to not just a championship, we're talking, because that's the other thing here. This is not just a strategy to make a one-run thing like the Rams did this past year. This is the type of strategy that you've identified. Okay, my core is young. My core is all going to be coming up for contract extensions at approximately the same time, within a 2 to 3 year period, all of them. But we want to keep them together because we want to make, I hate to use the word dynasty, but that's what everybody wants. So if you believe that you have that type of formula, then yeah, I think it is the perfect strategy. And the Saints, even with last year's 9-8 record notwithstanding, and there were certainly extenuating circumstances that caused that, you can't argue with the results. I mean, 4 straight NFC South championships, legitimate Super Bowl contenders in all 4 of those years, and most of that talent still remains. Very little talent since 2017. Well, we'll even go back to 2016. Very little of that core talent has been lost, due to the Saints can't afford them, or this or that, or anything else. So I like the strategy that the Saints are employing, but that's only because of the players that they're employing it on, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It absolutely does. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, I had a discussion or a debate with a guy on Twitter who was basically saying, well, if you had Peyton and Breeze, I can understand you restructuring deals to make that one more run, but you don't have Drew Brees anymore, and you just lost Sean Payton. He retired. So wouldn't this be a great time to hit a reset? And I said no, because just like what you pointed out, this was a 9-8 team with 4 different quarterbacks, 53 different starters, the whole bit. And the NFC now is wide open. The Bucks just lost one of their best guards, who's at 28 years old, announced he's going to retire. They've got a ton of free agents, and their quarterback looks like it's going to be Kyle Trask. All this quarterback movement we thought was going to happen. Aaron Rodgers went out of Green Bay, Russell Wilson out of Seattle. Even talk of Kyler Murray wanting to get out of Phoenix or Arizona because he wants to get paid. It really isn't going to happen. You'll have a very small, limited quarterback free agent movement right now. And this draft class is probably one of the weakest draft classes since probably 2016, 2014. I have to go back and look at the year exactly. What year was it? Let me see. I looked it up yesterday.
2015. I mean, Jameis went number 1 overall. Mariota went number 2.
Mariota went 2. And neither one of those are franchise quarterbacks.
Right.
Yeah, I know 2013 was a bad draft, but let me just see.
Trubisky came out in 2017, right?
Yeah.
And that was the same year Mahomes was drafted as well. Mahomes, Watson. So you can't call that. Trubisky isn't exactly the torchbearer for that class, but you can't call it weak either.
Well, and that's the thing. Trubisky, I read one person saying Trubisky has had more inquiries about him and people looking at his stuff than the rookies. The rookie draft class. Yeah, the 2013 class, quarterback wasn't even taken in the first round. Oh, yes, it was. E.J. Manuel. Okay. So EJ Manuel was taken in the first round. But get a load of
Looks
these
like
get a load of these top 5 picks. You've got Eric Fisher taken number 1 overall by the Chiefs. Luke Joeckel by Jacksonville. Deion Jordan by the Dolphins. Lane Johnson, Oklahoma, by the Eagles from Oklahoma. Another tackle. So you have 3 tackles taken in the first round. And here comes the other defensive end, Ezekiel Ansah, by the Lions. So that was their top 5. First LSU player, Barkevius Mingo. Tavon Austin was taken as the first receiver. D. Milner was the first cornerback by the Jets. You don't get a Pro Bowler until you get to Sheldon Richardson at 13. The Saints took Kenny Vaccaro. I mean, it just goes down from there.
wow.
Yeah. Xavier Rhodes ended up being one of the best corners in this draft. Desmond Trufant was probably the second best. Eric Reed was the best safety. DeAndre Hopkins went all the way at 27. Sylvester Williams. I remember I was like obsessed with Sylvester Williams in the draft. I wanted that guy so badly. So it's just funny. You start looking. This is the other reason why the 2013 draft was a great reason why I was saying things like, it doesn't matter where you pick. It matters who you pick.
Yeah.
Because just because you have a top 5 pick doesn't mean you get one of the top 5 players in the draft. You get the guy who's rated the highest, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, going back to what we were just saying before about Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota, those are the top 2 draft picks in the 2016 draft class. Jameis Winston will be a free agent. I think Marcus Mariota is a free agent as well. I don't know.
You're right.
Yeah. To me, you don't start trading players away for draft picks because this draft class doesn't look particularly deep or strong in the areas that you need players at.
Mm-hmm.
So why not work on keeping the players that you've got? And keeping that core together and just finding a quarterback who can be a game manager right now until you can find that franchise guy. I mean, to me, that's what makes the most sense, especially with a new coach and coming off of so much success that Sean Payton had.
Mm-hmm. And if you're going to hit a total rebuild, then yeah, you do shift directions. You don't keep kicking the can down the road like Loomis and Harley have.
Mm-hmm.
But if that were the case, then you would also be putting yourself in a position to draft a rookie quarterback and literally start from scratch. Yeah. And I think that the fact that the Saints hired Dennis Allen and not a young first-time head coach, either from the college ranks or coordinator, I think it tells us that that ownership is not. I'm not going to necessarily say ownership is going to have very little patience, but ownership expects to continue winning now and for the foreseeable future. So again, if you're going to have an ownership with that sort of mindset, you have to employ the strategy, the personnel strategy that the Saints continue to employ this offseason so far.
Completely agree because, they said we're not blowing this team up. They did hire basically from within. They've tweaked the assistant coaching staff, but this is basically the same staff, same front office, same scouts. Everything's the same, just a different man as the head coach. So you're going to basically have the same team, or you're going to want to have the same team with just a few tweaks that you think will make this team a better team than the one in 2021. I mean, so these numbers aren't impossible to overcome by extending guys like Ramczyk and Thomas and Lattimore, who I'm sure they're going to approach next.
Yeah.
You're still and Kamara, you're still keeping your core together. Now, people were upset that when you restructure Andrus Peat, you're basically extending him.
Yes.
And people were mad about that. Oh God, we got another couple years of Pete then. But to me, you look at Cesar Ruiz,
Uh-huh.
there sure ain't a hell of a lot of choices out there. You're not going to go grab somebody even better. And now Tampa's got a hole at guard. So the guard market is going to be even harder to
Yep.
get a hold of. So why not keep a guy? Yes, he can't stay healthy. Yes, he struggles in pass protection, but they like what he does in the running game and they overall like his performance. They think if they can keep him healthy, you'll see a much better player. And I think that's also why you saw Doug Marrone come in as the offensive line coach to fix the issues they have in the offensive line, fix Ruiz, get Pete in better condition, and get Pete doing better things so he stops making the mistakes he makes in pass coverage. But he's a young player. You're not extending to Leon Gray, for example. And I'm going back in time there, but Leon Gray, for those of you who don't remember or weren't alive when he was playing for the Saints, he was a former Pro Bowl tackle for the Oilers. I think he even came from the Patriots before that. And he's infamous because that's the player that Bum Phillips traded Archie Manning to Houston for, is Leon Gray. Leon Gray lasted a season and a half. He was past his prime in Houston, and we gave up Archie for him. And he was a washed up player by the time we got him. He barely contributed. So we don't have that kind of team. We don't have old players on this team. The oldest players in this team are Malcolm Jenkins, Cam Jordan, and Mark Ingram. There's your oldest players on the team. And two of the three are still playing at a very high level. And to me, I think Mark Ingram, although he can't be a 50-50 running back, he can still offer you something.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And I think that's what the real issue comes down to. And Pete is the microcosm for this strategy. I know, and I see, hear, and read the same things that you do from people about Andrus Peat. The reality is, look at the free agent market. Who you're going to get that's as good, let alone better. A guy like Brandon Scherf from the Redskins, or whatever they want to call themselves this week.
Yeah.
If he hits the open market, maybe Connor Williams from the Cowboys if he hits the open market. Well, guess what, folks? Pete is viewed around the league. Pete is viewed in the same category as these two guys. And you're not going to get any cheaper with Scherf or Connor Williams. You'd probably be more expensive. Outside of that, you have Austin Corbett from the Rams. I really like if he hits the market. He'd be cheaper. Everybody else is older than Pete, would cost nearly as much as Pete, and is not as good as Pete when Pete is on the field. So, okay, what's your strategy to combat that? Well, you let go of Pete and draft one. Okay. How'd Cesar Ruiz work out for you, folks? So that's what you're looking at as a roll of the dice, where you not only could have a Ruiz at right guard, you could have a Ruiz at left guard too. At least Pete is a solid contributor, one of the best run blockers in the game. And inconsistency as a pass protector, and I'm putting that mildly. But like you said, the Saints love him. If Pete hit the open market, he'd be on the market for about 30 minutes before he'd be snatched up.
The Chiefs were going after him when the Saints re-signed him. The Chiefs were interested in the Chiefs, 4 AFC championship games, consecutive AFC championship games. I think they know what they're doing on offense.
Mm-hmm.
It's and again, like you said, you're going to pay more for basically a lateral move. You're not going to get a better player. And okay, if we're going to go draft somebody, we're going to draft somebody better than Ruiz. All right, where are you going to take him? Because don't you want a wide receiver in the first round? Don't you want a tight end? Don't you want, you start going through the wish list. You've got more players that you want than draft picks available.
Yep.
So yeah. Yeah, Ruiz is the best thing ever happened to Pete. Yeah.
John, you're right.
We're stuck with him for now, only because he's on his rookie contract.
Right.
So, he's cheap. That's the advantage he has. So you have one more season to fix him. Then you can decide, you know what, we're not going to pick up his option, and we'll let him go after 4 years if he doesn't pan out. Or we'll try trading him. One of those things. So, yeah, I saw that too, Calvin. He said some jackass today said the Saints need to take a running back in the first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good segue, by the way, Calvin.
Huh?
Yeah, Calvin gave us a good segue.
And yeah, exactly. I think that we should look at getting another running back, but not in the first round. There's no reason to take a first round. That's the issue I have with taking a receiver in the first round, although I like receivers in the first round. You got that 5-year contract. You want to really save that for a critical player like the way this team is built. You want to save that 5-year contract for like a linebacker or a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman, one of those positions. It's not that I hate the idea of taking a receiver in the first round. I like it a lot because, I like Jameson I can't even think. Williams. Thank you, Jameson Williams. I saw the one you like, Calvin. What was it? Burke is the one you had.
Treylon from Arkansas. Yeah.
Yeah. My son likes him a lot too. But, a lot of you can get a lot of use out of a 5-year contract receiver, but you do have Michael Thomas on this roster, and you have Michael Thomas's contract on this roster. Right. So that's the thing you kind of have to think about with that. We lost Carl Nix because we made Jari Evans, the highest paid guard in the league. So, that kind of, sometimes that plays into it too. So, but do you believe we need a running back, another running back on this team?
Yeah, I do. I don't consider it a high priority for this team. Certainly not a first-round priority. I would say not even a second-round priority. This is a position that you could see the Saints address in free agency. And believe it or not, I would feel this way about the running back position, even if Kamara wouldn't have gotten himself in legal trouble. Now that he has, and that muddies up the waters big time, I think it's an absolute necessity that the Saints bring in who they believe is a starting caliber back, not to take snaps away from Kamara, but to just complement Kamara. You said it just a few minutes ago. Ingram proved, to us last year before he got hurt, that he's still a quality back. But I think at this stage of his career, Mark can only be a complimentary back. It's not a 1-2 starting punch like you had in before Ingram left in 2018. But you look at free agency, guys like Marlon Mack, Alex Collins, Ronald Jones. These are just to name a few names. They'll be available, and you can get all of those guys that I just mentioned, along with a handful more, for less than $3 million a year average. You bring them in for a year or two. I don't want to hear any BS that the Saints should trade for Saquon Barkley, go after Leonard Fournette, Sony Michel, Melvin Gordon, any of those big names. No, it's good if they address it in free agency. It's going to be the next tier down, a Marlon Mack type of player, who, by the way, the Saints were interested in at the trade deadline. I don't remember if it might have been last year, maybe year before. He's that type of back, the Mark Ingram type of between the tackles guy. If you decide to address it in the draft, you decide to bring Ingram back to complement Kamara, and you want to bring in a young guy to kind of groom, because Mark's only got a year or two left. Then Robinson from Alabama I saw mentioned, the kid from Michigan State, kid from Florida. Those are the three names off the top of my head, that might even fall to the third round. If I'm the Saints at that point, and I decide I do want to take a back in the round, I wait for that's a position where I wait for the board to come to me. I address what I want to address with my first and second round picks. The Saints have 2 third-round picks. That's a luxury. So you wait to see how the board unfolds, see if there's any of those backs that I just mentioned or anybody that they like starts to fall in a range where they can grab them. That's where you may see them make a move, but it's not going to be in a first or second round pick, folks.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, how do you feel about Leonard Fournette? Do you think he's an aging player that's looking for one last big contract, or is he a guy that maybe you could bring in at his point of his career and want to be a 1-2 punch with Alvin Kamara?
No, I believe Fournette is on the downside of his career. He's still got some good ball left. But I believe that he thinks he's still a number one, unquestioned number one back, and certainly looking for one last payday. We saw it not so much in Tampa last year because he was the man, but the year before when they won the Super Bowl championship, Ronald Jones was their number one ball carrier through most of that year, and Fournette did nothing but whine, cry, and sulk. And there were even some mumblings out of Tampa Bay that the Buccaneers might release him before their playoff run because he was just that much of a problem in the locker room for Arians and some of the teammates. Now that didn't happen. Jones got nicked up, and Fournette had one hell of a playoff run, just going to prove between that and last year, the 2021 year that he could still play. But I can't see him being the type of personality to accept a complimentary role to an Alvin Kamara. I think he wants to go somewhere and be a number one back still.
You know who Fournette always reminded me of? Brandon Jacobs from the Giants.
That's a good one.
Another guy from New Orleans. He's a bruiser, but it's like he should do more than he does. He should be somebody who just punishes players, and you don't get that out of him. He's not that kind of back. He's more like a how do I describe it? I don't want to say he runs soft because that's not accurate, but he runs too high and gets brought down way too easily for a guy his size running with his kind of power.
Fournette, Fournette has always reminded me of Herschel Walker.
Yeah.
Herschel Walker was a man-child in college, truly one of the most unstoppable college players I've ever seen. Herschel got to the NFL after 2 years in the USFL. Players in general were bigger, stronger, faster, more along Herschel's athletic caliber, physical caliber, and therefore he wasn't as effective. He, like Fournette, ran tall. Was fast in the open field, all that happy stuff. But that's Fournette kind of reminds me of Walker.
Yeah, that I would agree with that completely because Herschel Walker was very much like that. He ran. It's like Eric Dickerson's one of the few running backs I can think of that ran upright and still plowed through people.
Yes,
but he had much more speed than any of these other power backs. So he could get away with running upright. He had a tremendous balance, and I think a lot of these guys just big. And I would like to see this. This is why I would like to see him on the Saints. So I want to see how he and CD Deuce would get along. Some shit would happen at practice.
Yeah. Trade for Mike Evans and Javon Wims while we're at it.
There we go. But yeah, most of these other guys, they just don't. They all want to be an Earl Campbell, but they're not Earl Campbell.
Yeah.
You know, they want to be Jim Brown, but they're not Jim Brown. You know, everybody thinks they're built like Jim Brown, and Fournette looks impressive in his pads, looks
Hmm.
impressive standing there, but it's just not like he can just get through and smash through that line like you want him to. He's not a Derrick Henry. He's not leaving people strewn about. Um, so yeah, I feel the same way. I think you can probably get an expensive guy in free agency and probably find a running back in the later rounds. Day 3. Tony Jones obviously is not going to be the guy next year as the first guy
Right.
off the bench. Dwayne Washington keeps his job because he's a special teams guy. It's funny, Sean has keyed his some of his draft choices based on and free agent pickups, undrafted free agent pickups, I should say, as being good special teams guys.
Oh yeah.
And you see the results. You see a much better special teams program for the Saints than you did in previous years. I mean, you just think about in 2016,
Yeah.
was a Denver guy ran it back for a touchdown, although he stepped out of bounds. Uh,
Yes.
you could think about 2014, 2013, bad special teams play, and focusing more on getting guys who can play, who are there just to play special teams, like a JT Gray, has really panned out for the Saints in a way that the average fan looking at the roster, why are these guys on this team? This is why these guys on this team. They're not there to play offense, not there to play defense. They're there strictly as special teams guys. And you need to have a few of those on your team. They can play defense or offense in a pinch, but that's not their role in this team. Their role in this team is to play that third part of the game. It reminds me, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. So some guy in a football group I'm in, 70 to 79, said Ray Guy's overrated. And he goes and he was just a classic person. Obviously, he'd never seen him play.
Yeah.
Just found the statistic on the thing and said, he only averaged so many yards per punt. Okay. Like somebody said, the Raiders got to midfield and punted. He pinned him inside the 5. Yeah. The yards per punt average doesn't look very good. What were the return yards on those punts? Not very much. So that's the part of the game that people just sort of miss,
Yeah.
So I guess the next question would be then, do you think the Saints, outside of the guys they want to re-sign, do you think the Saints will be pretty active in free agency, or do you think they're going to mostly focus on the guys that they need to have on this roster? They need to keep on this roster, I should say.
It's going to be more the latter. They're going to focus on their own, and that we keep talking about quarterback. Maybe Jameis Winston is the highest priority. Maybe they have other plans. Marcus Williams, I think you and I are in agreement, and most of Who Dat Nation is in agreement that Williams, if he's not the highest priority, then he's second only to Winston. And then you have other big time contributors that the Saints could, if they're smart, they could probably get back at a reasonable rate. Quan Alexander, PJ Williams both come to mind. You have some interesting questions to address in your restricted free agents. Deontay Hardy, Carl Granderson, and Shai Tuttle are all restricted free agents. How high are they going to tender them? Especially Deontay. I think the question everybody is waiting for that. Are you going to put a high premium on keeping Shai Tuttle? At a defensive tackle position that was severely thinned last year. What about Carl Granderson? He's shown great promise as a pass rusher. Do you want to keep a premium on keeping him? If so, then you might have to part with Tanoa Passanio to save yourself a little bit of salary cap room. So which way are the scales going to tip in that direction? And the Saints are going to create enough room, salary cap room, to go hunting in free agency, but it's not going to be this big old spending spree where they're bringing in a bunch of players. I see Ireland and Mickey Loomis being very selective and who and what positions they target in free agency after they get their own in-house boxes checked off.
One of the things I tell people is that the Saints never or rarely go into the draft saying, I need that position because I have nothing there. I need that position because I have nothing there. This past year with receiver and cornerback, and he at least got Paulson Adebo, that was the case, that they needed a cornerback number two. They had nothing. Most of the time they try and make moves that if I don't get the guy I like, I at least have this guy I can fall back on right now. That's where I think they go in free agency. One of the stories I saw was, of course, his name's being linked to everybody that needs a quarterback. But Mitch Trubisky is supposedly on the Saints' radar, as well as the Steelers, the Broncos, I think a couple other teams. Okay. How do you read something like that? I've got my own thing thinking about that, but how do you read something like that?
I just kind of gloss over it and take it with a grain of salt. I don't completely ignore it. But in my opinion, a Mitchell Trubisky is a serious downgrade from what you had in Jameis Winston. The Saints have an opportunity to bring Winston back right now. In fact, even if they decide to that they want to use maybe the franchise tag to keep him from getting onto the open market at all while they negotiate a long-term, at least, and I say long-term, I'm thinking like 3 years with somebody like Winston. They have that option. So if someone like New Orleans is targeting a Mitchell Trubisky, A, they see something that I don't, and that's okay because they get paid to do that. I don't. But B, it tells me that they saw a serious hole in Winston's game, and they view Trubisky. Trubisky is nothing more than a stopgap solution. So if you're the Saints and you bring in a guy like Trubisky, then quarterback is still a possibility in this year's first round, or at the very least, you plan on positioning yourself for a big move for a quarterback in the 2023 first round. And that's the way I view a guy like Mitchell Trubisky.
I was going to say pretty much the same thing. I think if there's any kind of serious move on a Mitchell Trubisky or Marcus Mariota, it's because you have a number in mind that you want to pay a quarterback. And if Jameis Winston balks at it and says, I can go to Pittsburgh and get more money, the Saints can say, fine, nice to know you. Glad you had an opportunity. And I'm just going to go ahead and sign this guy, whoever it is, Trubisky, Mariota, whatever. You're going to sign this guy, and he is a placeholder. Calvin says they're gonna tank for Bryce Young. I don't know if it's tanking, but I think it's the case of you're not going to be our guy. You're our guy. You're Mr. Right now, not Mr. Right, and we're going to use you as a game manager. Try and Ryan Fitzpatrick, Ryan Tannehill, with this team where the defense and special teams and the running game kind of wins the game, and your job is not to screw things up. So
you even look at San Francisco had a very similar strategy with Garoppolo. When they got Jimmy G, they were hoping with fingers crossed that he would be the long-term answer, but they obviously quickly identified that he wasn't. Otherwise, they wouldn't have drafted Trey Lance. But the strategy has worked fairly well for San Francisco.
I think with Garoppolo, I think the other thing that's why they went after Lance is Garoppolo misses so many games for injuries.
Yep.
It really torpedoed their season last year when Garoppolo missed so much of that season. The guys they had there, and I think, Shanahan's attitude is, hey, I can do more with a younger, healthier quarterback. And you got all these young running quarterbacks like this, like what's his name, Kyler Murray, or to an extent Lamar Jackson. But you got guys you can do stuff with. Let's just go with this. Let me get it. Give me a running quarterback with a strong arm, even Josh Allen, a running quarterback with a strong arm, and he can be my fourth running back. I'm going to have my platoon of running backs, but he can kind of be my fourth running back. And I'll have somebody who can throw the ball even deeper than Garoppolo. And Garoppolo is still an option too, because I think the 49ers are interested in getting rid of him. He had shoulder surgery, which was interesting.
Yep.
That really torpedoes their attitude or their attitude, their plans to get a high draft pick, I think.
I agree.
I think it's more likely now it's a day 2. I would give a day 3 pick for him. I give him a 4th round pick, and if they want a player, if I'm the Saints, I'm giving them my 4th round pick and Roby.
There you
here.
Go.
You need a starting corner. Roby's a good starting corner. A 4th round pick in Roby, and I can even throw in a low pick that could catapult to a much higher pick if Garoppolo starts 16 games. He throws for 5,000 yards. He throws over 30 touchdowns. He gets us to the NFC Championship game.
Mm-hmm.
Now that pick starts to in 2023 could go up pretty high, and I don't give a damn because I'm getting a lot of success out of him. I could put a deal like that together if I feel like Garoppolo's a better option than Jameis Winston, or I can't afford Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston's gone because the Steelers are going to offer him a 5-year, $100 million deal, a 5-year, $75 million deal. I can't match that. They want to pay him, $20, $25 million a year. I can't match it. I can offer him 12 to 15 million. He gets paid 20 million. I'm out of the market. So it's just.
Let me ask you this, and I've mentioned it on a couple different shows. I mentioned it in passing tonight, but I'll present the question to you. Mickey Loomis is fired. Alan Ulrich takes over.
No, you're in trouble now.
You've identified Jameis Winston as your starting quarterback, but you can't reach an agreement with him before March 8th, which is the franchise tag deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Do you franchise tag Jameis Winston, thinking with the plan that you're going to get a long-term deal done, a 3-year deal done before training camp?
I think it all depends on the kind of conversation I'm having with Winston's agent. How soon do I feel like I'm going to get a deal that I have to worry about him competing with somebody else? I'd rather not use a tag on him simply because it's a $15 million tag. I think that's what I read.
28 million for quarterbacks.
28 million. So I'm already over 30 million over the cap. I have to make room for that to afford that tag. I can afford a 12 million tag for Marcus Williams. I can maneuver the cap around, even getting rid of Roby to clear $10 million so I can afford Williams. I don't know if I can afford to tag Jameis Winston. So I'm doing what the Saints are probably doing. I'm doing my due diligence to find out who's my backup. So I'm not, oh shit, what do I do now? And I'm looking at an offer for Garoppolo only because I know that's one guy that will be available for a trade, as opposed to, I don't know, going after Kirk Cousins or God knows who else that they've got on the rumor market. As you know, I know the 49ers are interested in moving Garoppolo.
Right.
So, and then I'm looking at the Marcus Mariotas, the Mitch Trubisky's, the Ryan Fitzpatrick, those kind of guys. Even Taylor Heineke.
Sure.
I hate to say it, but Taylor Heineke, yeah, is he much of an upgrade over Taysom Hill? He's probably this is going to sound terrible, but he's like a poor man's Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah.
I kind of would call him that. He's in that range. It doesn't mean I think I can win the NFC South and and make a playoff run with a Taylor Heineke. What it does mean is I think I can use him and he can run my offense if I give him some other pieces.
Yeah.
So the pressure's not on him to win with his arm. That's the thing I'm thinking about with that.
And I think a guy like Heineke or even Marcus Mariota, for that matter, are they better quarterbacks than Taysom Hill? I don't think so necessarily. It's tomato, but I would take a Heineke or a Mariota into my system if I can't get a Winston or a Garoppolo. I would take a Heineke or a Mariota only because at that point I can move Taysom Hill to what he does best and his jack of all trades, knowing that I still have Taysom Hill as a fallback option if my Mariota or Heineke either A gets hurt or B just is a disaster.
Yeah, and I also have to really like a quarterback in this draft class too.
Oh yeah.
Just like they seem to really like Ian Book last year, a Corral, Malik Willis, or I'm going to leave Pickett out of this because I think Pickett is probably one of the first. Well, I think he's going to be one of the first quarterbacks taken off the board. And I think a team like the Steelers, if he falls, I think the Steelers are a team that we're looking hard at him. They do, Calvin. But I'm saying if I lose Winston and I can't make a trade for Garoppolo, and I'm forced to look at a guy like Heineke or Mariota or Fitzpatrick, I'm looking at a guy, and this is where it's hard. This is where it's hard for people to come to grips with. They look at every quarterback as this is the guy you're going to invest $100 million in. This is what you're going to do. No, and this is a good segue because you're bringing him up right here, Carson Wentz. The Indianapolis Colts have gone through 4 quarterbacks now in 4 years.
Yeah.
If I'm taking a Heineke or a Mariota or Ryan Fitzpatrick, it's because you're my placeholder just so I can play this year. Next year, I'm getting rid of you. I'm getting somebody else in here. And that's how I look at those guys. I wouldn't trade for Wentz because I would just wait for the Colts to dump him.
Exactly. I look at Wentz very much the same way, and very much the same kind of light as Jameis Winston was when he left Tampa Bay. I like Wentz coming out of college. He certainly showed some glimpses his first two and a half years in Calvin, his first couple of years in Philadelphia, and he's been injury prone and skittish in the pocket. Is that coaching? Is that confidence? Is that team around him? And is it all of the above? I think Wentz could still have the skill set to play in the NFL, but like you, I wouldn't trade for him. If he becomes available on a free agent market, I bring him in on a deal like they brought Winston in, groom him, see what I have behind closed doors, and then move from there.
Yeah, Wentz is the thing that I think that really torpedoes Wentz's options in this market is when he was with Philadelphia. You can easily say, look, Frank Reich moved on. That was his quarterback guru. This is why I also didn't want, when they were interviewing coaches, I did not want to bring Doug Peterson in, because I felt like Doug Peterson won in spite of the things he had around, that
Yeah.
team, instead of because of him. That doesn't mean I think Peterson's a terrible coach. I just don't think Peterson is as good a coach as people made him out to be. I thought Frank Reich was the reason why Wentz was playing at a MVP kind of level the year the Eagles went to the Super Bowl. But this last year, with you've got your coach, you're on a pretty good playoff caliber team, and some of these games you lost because of you, not because of, oh, you know what? Yeah, my receivers were all hurt, or yeah, my defense gave up some stuff. No, you lost because Wentz was terrible, and I have. It's very hard for me to say, yeah, I'm pull the trigger on Wentz. That's why I didn't even have him in any of these possible scenarios.
Same.
I think Wentz is one of these guys who's going to hang around for a little while as a backup and then just kind of fade away from the league, because I think the Colts experience really has opened some scouts and some GM's eyes at, like, yeah, maybe Peterson wasn't the problem. Maybe it was Wentz, So I'm just not a fan. um, Last question of the night before we wrap it up. I'll throw it out there. Tight end. Do you go after a tight end in free agency, or is there a tight end in the draft that you like better?
There's zero question. I go after a tight end in free agency, and I believe that this is a major need for this team.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is a pass catching tight end.
Mm-hmm.
And excuse me while I shuffle through notes here. Yeah, my reasoning is this: I would go for a tight end in free agency and a receiver early in the draft, because wide receivers in free agency are just so massively overpriced.
Oh, absolutely.
You could get a decent one a week or 2 weeks into free agency that might contribute. But if you're going to get a star, it's going to come from the draft. Meanwhile, on the flip side, a free agent tight end, even the high end free agent tight end, top tier free agent tight ends are along the same financial level as the mid or lower tiered free agent wide receivers. Meanwhile, you don't often see a first or second round tight end make an immediate impact. I know Kyle Pitts did last year. That's an anomaly. Usually it takes, even a first, second round guy, usually it takes a year or two for a rookie tight end to get antiquated. And there's so many interesting names on the free agent market at tight end. Gesicki probably going to be franchise tagged. Njoku, I'm hearing word out of Cleveland that he'll be tagged. But you still have Hayden Hurst, a former number one draft choice. Dalton Schultz, CJ Uzoma, Robert Tonyan from the Packers, OJ Howard from the Buccaneers, who I love. All of those guys, Schultz and CJ will probably be at around $10 million a year. Same with Tonyan. Again, think of the wide receiver that you could get at $10 million a year. It's not going to be a top tier. You pay a tight end $10 million a year, it's going to be and better be a top delivering tight end. And some of these names on here you could get for as little as 4, 5, even $6 million a year, and they're going to be instant major contributors to your offense.
I feel the same way, because I think Trautman has turned out to be what some of us thought he was, just another Josh Hill, but we traded it to get him. Vanette may or may not be on the roster next year. He's a cap casualty, a possibility, just depending on what they do. I think the free agent market's way overpriced. That's the race cars. That's why I didn't even bring up free agents tonight. That's the race car where you're looking for a good secondhand truck that you're not going to pay a lot of money for, and that's what you're doing in tight end market. Yeah, I think they do try and sign a pass catching tight end. You look at the last what since they traded Jimmy Graham, they have brought in or Jared Cook a couple years ago. They brought in um, what was it?
Fleener.
Kobe Fleener. Who was the guy? And Ben Watson. They brought back Ben Watson. So they know what they want, what they need, and I think again, if OJ Howard they just let him walk in free agency, I think OJ Howard's a guy you can kind of get at a cheap price. Yeah, he's got injury problems. Yeah, he has had problems focused on catching the ball. But I think they can get some use out of him and sign him at an inexpensive contract. Just to borrow a line from Larry David, curb your enthusiasm. He is not going to be Jimmy Graham. Zach Ertz is an interesting concept because I think the Cardinals got him for a Super Bowl run and it didn't happen. I think he's on the backside of his career, but he can be your Ben Watson kind of tight end. Yeah, I think that's where he'll fit in. No, Kobe Fleener is not available. He's his concussions have kind of ended his career. But regardless of who they sign, you're not going to get a Jimmy Graham. You're not going to get somebody. You're not getting a I'm trying to think of some of the young tight ends, a Mark Andrews kind of tight end, a guy who's going to compete with Michael Thomas as your number one receiver. You're going to get a guy who's going to catch about 40 to 50 passes, probably about 6 touchdowns, and really be a target on third down. That's what they're going to be using him for. And he has to be able to block and catch passes, but they want him to run receiver routes. So,
yeah, and for that, I like Hayden Hurst personally. Obviously Gesicki, Njoku, Dalton Schultz would be at the top of my wish list. But realistically, even if those guys are available, the Saints, even with all their salary cap magic, they've been able to do the salary cap magic because they have not thrown a ton of money like they did at the Kobe Fleeners and the Jarris Birds of the world. So they're going to continue that strategy. John Butler, I did see that Kyle Rudolph got released today. Rudolph, I put in the same light as what Alan said about Zach Ertz. Any of those guys would be immediate contributors to the Saints. But we aren't looking for Jimmy Graham type number. You said 40, 50 catches. I'm thinking about, I agree, 45, 50 receptions. On the high side, about 700 to 750 yards. A guy that's going to at least threaten down the field and be a bona fide target in the middle of the field to kind of open up those boundary lanes for the smaller wide receivers, the Deontay Harris, the Marquez Callaways.
You need a seam threat. You need a seam threat guy, and a guy doesn't put the damn ball on the ground like Jared Cook did. Because they'll go to a cover 2 to try and confuse Jameis if Jameis is the quarterback. So getting a guy who's a matchup nightmare for the linebackers, that's where he'll do his damage. The guy in the red zone who's got a big body, can box out. Kyle Rudolph, to me, there's a trend, okay? We haven't done it in a while, but I found that there was a time where the Saints would take people who kicked their ass in a game, especially a playoff game. When we signed Eric Allen as a free agent, when we signed Michael Haynes as a free agent, we signed guys that seemed to kick our ass. Wade Wilson, even to an extent, was was one of those guys because he beat us in 1987 and he beat us again in 1991. So. When you get those kind of guys, that's how the Saints used to go after these people. Brad Muster had a huge game in the 1990 playoff game. That's why they brought him in. So it was like, okay, what free agents come from a team that kicked our ass? Oh, okay, yeah, they're going to sign this guy because he's one of them. So I don't know. I don't know if they still follow that format, but that's when I could see him taking Kyle Rudolph, because guess who caught the game-winning touchdown in the playoff game? And Kyle
He
Rudolph.
pushed off, by the way, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's the one. Was he the one that caught the ball to set up the touchdown down near the goal, now down to the goal line, or was that Adam Thielen? I don't remember.
The deep pass, that was Thielen.
That was Thielen. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was like the first pass that Lattimore was out because he had gotten hurt the play before, and that was the matchup.
PJ Williams came in. PJ Williams was targeted. I turned to Lauren and I said they're going to throw at PJ Williams. They threw at PJ Williams. Then they threw at PJ Williams again, and the Saints season ended.
Yes. Yeah, and I agree. He did push off, but once they got inside got down to the field like that, I was like, yeah. I said, this game's over. All right. That's kind of all I had really to talk about tonight. I got to kind of stretch some of these topics out. We're going to spend a whole episode on receivers. And when's the combine? Is the combine this week?
It actually started. Tight ends, quarterbacks, and wide receivers started their interviews and light workouts today. So they'll be the focus over the next couple of days. Obviously, the three biggest needs for the Saints. So I realize that a lot of people are going to be paying attention to the combine the next few days.
The thing to watch for, I don't think they're as bad as they used to be, but the workout warrior. Watch for the guy who has the unbelievable combine, especially if he plays offensive or defensive line or plays tight end. That's the guy that you probably, especially into a small school, that's a guy the Saints will probably target at some point during the draft. And you're like, why? But they do. That's where Teron Armstead came from. That's where Jimmy Graham came from. That was the good ones. It's where Stanley Jean-Baptiste came from, unfortunately. And the most famous of all of them is Mike Mamula, the Eagles defensive lineman. He had an unbelievable combine, and they forgot to see whether or not he could actually play football.
Right.
Yeah, Kyle did push off. I totally agree with that, but that was just postponing the inevitable. That was a very frustrating game, for many reasons, but it was frustrating that we allowed the Vikings to hang around and do the damage they did to our offensive line that day.
Yeah.
Because that's the offensive line is what lost that game.
It is. Specifically the interior spots.
Yes. Taysom Hill almost single-handedly won that game. It was unbelievable what he was doing out there. But the offensive line was just crap that day. Now Calvin, when I in the Bumble, when I saw that Clarice, that's the Clarice I was thinking of is not the Clarice from the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
No, my mind immediately went to Silence of the Lambs.
So did mine. So did mine. Yeah, Zion may be maybe getting that big. Zion might be a tight end. That's a shame. The kid's only 21 years old. I cannot believe that. He's the same age as my youngest daughter. It is what it is. I mean, I feel bad for the kid, but he needs to get back as soon as he can. Forgive me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yawn in front of everybody. In the meantime, thank you guys for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.